Trying to get situated here. There we go. All right, so this morning I want to read from Second Samuel verses chapter 6 verses 1 through 11. And this is a story of a fatal event that happened. So let me go ahead and read it. Now, David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 3,000, and David arose and went with all the people who were with him to Baal Judah to bring up from the ark of God, which is called by the name, the very name of the host who is enthroned above the cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart that they might bring it home from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahoiah, the sons of Abinadab, were leading the new cart. So they brought it with the ark of God from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Ahoiah was walking ahead of the ark. Meanwhile, David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with all kinds of instruments made of fir wood and with lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. But when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out toward the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen nearly upset it. And the anger of the Lord burned against Uzzah, and God struck him down there for his irreverence, and he died there by the ark of God. David became angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah, and that place was called Perez Uzzah to this day. So David was afraid of the Lord that day. He said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" And David was unwilling to move the ark of the Lord into the city of David with him. But David took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Thus the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. So the Philistines had given the ark back to Israel, and it was being kept at it didn't excuse me, I'm having trouble saying these names today. Abinadab's place. He wanted to bring it back to Jerusalem. Um, and they put it in the cart, and then when it's about to get to um, to an area, the cart um, kind of stumbled or whatever from whatever the ox had done, which made it look like the ark was going to fall. Well, Uzzah, trying to help, reached out to stable the ark. But the trouble is, the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, was never to be touched by the hands of men once the Ten Commandments and Aaron's staff um, was placed in it. Because once they put that stuff in it, and they closed the lid to the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of or God descended down upon it, and and sat upon the mercy seat, if I remember right. And at that point, the Ark of the Covenant became a holy relic. It became purified. So man could no longer touch it because man was sinful. And God doesn't abide, sin. Um, and of course, the wages of sin is death. So once God had sat on the mercy seat, it was too holy for any man to touch. And that's why God had commanded Moses that the ark has to be traveled by Levites, which were the chosen people of God to lead the people in following God's command. They were the priests and the scribes that became the Pharisees and the Sadducees uh, in Jesus' time. But they were the ones in charge to take care of the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, all of anything that had to do with worshiping and leading the people to worship for God. And God instructed Moses that the ark was to be carried by these poles that went through the rails of the Ark of the Covenant, so that no man's hands may touch it. Because, like I said, man is not clean, man is sinful, and God is holy. So Uzzah, when he touched the ark with his hand, even though well intended, he violated God's word, God's law, and therefore he struck Uzzah down dead. Now, I'm sure if the ark got upset, God would have kept it from falling, no doubt. Um, so maybe part of it could have been that Uzzah maybe had some doubts whether God would keep the ark from falling. But more than that, the mistake had already been made by David. King David either completely forgot about or just completely disregard God's commandment on how the ark is to travel, because he himself wanted the ark brought back to Jerusalem. um, and so he was going to bring it back his way, not God's way. And because of that act, a selfish act, if you think about it, King David inadvertently caused the demise of Uzzah. And it's interesting that David got angry at God for killing Uzzah for touching the ark. So it went from a celebration to a tragedy in an instant. But right then and there, David decided that he could not take the ark to Jerusalem because he became afraid of what the Lord would do if he continued on. So he left it at Obed-Edom's in place. And God blessed his household, all of his household, for allowing the ark to stay with him before David eventually brought it to Jerusalem, but this time he did it correctly. He did it God's way and not his way. So, the point of the story for us today um, is we can have good intentions, but if we're not doing things God's way, we could, you know, be the catalyst that can end somebody else through no fault of their own. Um, Either in this case, physically, or we could do it spiritually too. If we don't obey God and we don't do things that God wants us to do, and we think we know better, not only are we sinning against God, but we can have fatal ramifications um, to befall on others, not necessarily us. I mean, another example, when King Saul refused to completely eliminate all the people that God had told him to, I mean, God wanted him to destroy everything of the people that he sent against them. And instead, Saul kept the choice flocks, cattle. Um, he allowed some of the men to keep some of the women and children, and he kept the king alive when God clearly told him to wipe them all out. Well, not only did Saul lose the kingdom, and God gave it to David, but in the end, Saul witnessed and watched his sons die in battle before him, ending his line in an instant before he himself took his own life. So there's another story of how we cannot think that we know how to do things better than God. Because when we do and we act upon how we think things could happen, it can be tragic and even fatal to somebody else that we know down the line. Our obedience to God or our lack of obedience to God does have consequences that we cannot foresee and that we cannot foretell. So we need to be careful. We need to be mindful of doing something for God versus doing something for ourselves. As in the case with David wanting the ark back to Jerusalem, which was not a bad thing at all, but it was the way in which David did it. He didn't move the ark in God's way, he moved the ark in his way, and as a result, a man lost his life. So, kind of should give us pause to think about what we do. We just need to make sure that whatever we're doing that God tells us to do, we need to be sure that we're doing it His way and not our way. Because, like I said, there could be a fatal consequence involved when we decide that our way is better than God's way, and it never is. So, with that, I love you guys. You have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow.